Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Members of this House will be well aware that Labor opposes this bill at this point, and we do so with a sense of gravity and disappointment. As the Minister said in his opening remarks, there was a consensus of support behind this bill when it was first tabled, and in fact a great degree of consensus in this House existed behind the first version of the bill. And outside this House, the business community and the trade union movement and all manner of interest groups and commentators expressed support for what was to be a generational change in the architecture of our health and safety system in New Zealand. And I don't need to remind members that the Pike River mine disaster was an epoch-changing event in New Zealand. And it reminded, I think, everybody, when the truth came out, finally, through particularly the Royal Commission, that event, that disaster, was a damning indictment of a complete systemic failure in health and safety. And Mr Chairman, I want to direct my comments in part one to the purpose clause and making some general comments about Labor's view of this bill now. So we went from a feeling that there was widespread support for these changes, for the new architecture, for the Australian model law that offered a new template within which to build a really fit-for-purpose health and safety system for New Zealand today. And I can't underline enough how disappointed members on this side of the House are by I know the Minister doesn't like to say, to hear that this bill has been watered down, but it has. It has been watered down. It has been substantially weakened by the carve-out in the bill that effectively exempts firms with fewer than 30 employees from the requirement to allow the appointment or election of health and safety representatives when requested. It is going to carve out from the provisions in this bill more than 300,000 New Zealand employees, or a quarter of the workforce, perhaps. And the Minister said that in his opening remarks, that it was going to, the bill, the provisions around worker representation were going to cover 75% of the New Zealand workforce. Well, what about the other 25%? They don't deserve to be safe at work? They don't, well, Jonathan Young, the chair of the Select Committee, says yes, of course they do. But he's happy to stand up and vote for a bill that effectively cuts those people loose and denies them, it certainly does, deny them the right to be protected at work by effective worker representation structures in the workplace. And that is and will be the nub of this debate. John Key said in the aftermath of the Pike River disaster that he was going to do everything. He was going to do everything to deliver on the promise of remedying the glaring shortfalls in our health and safety system. And this carve-out, this watering down, is a betrayal, sir, of that promise. I want to point to a couple. It's quite interesting when you tally up the purpose clause in the bill. When you tally that up against some of the commentary in the independent task force, you can see that there was, in the transmission from the Pike River Royal Commission to the independent task force to the basic architecture of this bill, you can see a faithful representation of the findings and the recommendations from the task force into the purpose statement of the bill, sir. And that's why we did actually have a substantial level of agreement.
Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr.